My name is Lauren. I am 31 years old, and for more than a decade, I gave everything I had to my younger sister. I paid for her college, her car, her apartment, even the gown she wore on her wedding day. I thought maybe this time she would finally see me, finally say thank you. But when I walked into her wedding, carrying the gift I had wrapped with my own hands, she looked at me in front of everyone and told me I was not invited, that I needed to leave. My parents stood silently at her side, pretending I was nothing. I walked away humiliated, my heart pounding with years of sacrifices no one cared about. Yet, what happened inside that ballroom after I left turned her perfect day into something no one there will ever forget. Was it revenge? Or was it something far deeper? Stay with me until the end, because the truth behind what unfolded will shock you more than you can imagine, and that is how it began. The day I walked through the doors of her wedding, carrying the gift in my hands, still hoping for something different. I walked through the glass doors of the Lakeside Evergreen Resort with the gift box still in my hands. The wrapping paper creased from how tightly I had been holding it during the drive. The lobby shimmered with chandeliers and white roses that had been flown in for this one day. My heels clicked softly against the polished marble floor as I followed the signs toward the grand ballroom, telling myself to breathe. Telling myself that maybe today would finally be different. For weeks I had debated whether to come. I was not on the guest list, at least not officially. But I had paid for most of what surrounded me. The flowers, the string quartet echoing faintly from inside the hall, the very gown my sister was wearing. They all came from my savings, my late nights at the office, my sacrifices. I wanted to believe that once she saw me standing there, she would soften. She would remember what I had done for her. What I had given up? The air grew warmer as I stepped into the entrance of the ballroom. Guests in silk dresses and tailored suits glanced my way. Some smiled politely. Others looked curious, as though sensing tension in the air. I searched for my sister among the glittering crowd. Then I saw her. Chloe stood at the far end of the aisle, surrounded by bridesmaids, her veil glinting under the lights. She was radiant. Beautiful. And for one fragile second, my chest ached with pride. Her eyes met mine. The pride vanished. She froze. Her smile faltered, and she walked swiftly toward me. Her gown rustling with each step, the music quieted as conversations dropped into murmurs. By the time she reached me, nearly every guest had turned their head. "You are not supposed to be here." Her voice was low, but it carried through the hush of the room. I held out the gift box slightly, my hands trembling despite myself. "I only wanted to congratulate you. I thought I could still—" "No." Her tone sharpened. "You are not invited. Please leave." I blinked, trying to process her words. My own sister. The girl I had tucked into bed. The girl I had covered bills for, over and over, was dismissing me in front of strangers as though I was no one. Behind her, my parents appeared. Thomas adjusted his tie, avoiding my gaze, while Elaine folded her hands tightly in front of her. Neither spoke. Neither stepped forward. Their silence was louder than any accusation. The guests stirred, whispers flowing like ripples in water. Someone let out a soft laugh. I felt heat climb my neck and into my face. My fingers tightened around the box until the cardboard edges dug into my skin. Chloe glanced at the guests, and then back at me. Her smile returned. This time stiff. "Rehearsed. Please. Just go. Don't make a scene." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. 100 memories rushed through me in seconds. Birthday parties where I gave up my cake so she could have more. Nights when I worked overtime just to cover her rent. Mornings when she cried and I told her she deserved everything. And here I was, being told I did not belong. I looked past her shoulder into the glittering ballroom. The chandeliers cast rainbow flecks on the walls. Musicians sat poised with instruments ready to play. White orchids lined the aisle I had unknowingly paid for. Everything smelled of money and roses, of a life I had built for her yet was not allowed to touch. My parents shifted again. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. My father kept his eyes down. It was clear. They were siding with Chloe. They always had. I straightened my back and forced air into my lungs. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted. but steady. Congratulations. Her eyes narrow, perhaps expecting me to fight. To argue, but I only turned, the gift box still clutched in my hands, and walked slowly back toward the lobby. Every step echoed louder than the last, mingled with the buzzing whispers of guests. My heels seemed unbearably heavy, dragging me away from the warmth of the lights and into the cooler emptiness beyond the doors. As I passed through the threshold, the sound of the quartet swelled again behind me, as if the celebration could simply continue without pause. But in my chest, something fractured, something that could not be glued back with polite smiles or floral arrangements. I reached the parking lot where luxury cars gleamed under the afternoon sun. My own sedan sat at the far edge, unremarkable and alone. The gift box felt heavier than bricks in my arms. For a moment, I considered turning back, forcing them to look me in the eye. But my body would not move. My legs carried me only toward the car. The air smelled faintly of lake water, crisp and cold. I set the box gently on the passenger seat and gripped the steering wheel, though I had not started the engine yet. Inside, laughter rose again, muffled through the walls of wealth I had built, but was no longer welcome within. I stared at my reflection in the windshield. The image of a sister cast aside. My heart pounded, but my face was calm. Too calm. That calmness was not peace. It was something harder, colder, a silence that had been waiting for years to finally speak. I sat there as the first cloud shadows rolled across the lot, and I realized I was not leaving empty-handed. After all, I carried something far heavier than a gift box. I carried every unanswered sacrifice, every overlooked effort, every word of gratitude I had never received. And those things would not stay buried much longer. I remembered the first time I realized that Chloe and I were not standing on equal ground. I was 8 and she was 4. And we were in the backyard of our small house in Tacoma. She had spilled red paint across the picnic table we used for crafts, the kind of stain that never really comes out. My mother rushed outside, saw the mess, and without a second thought turned to me. "Lauren, why didn't you keep an eye on your sister?" I tried to explain that I had gone inside for only a moment to grab paper towels. But the explanation didn't matter. The punishment was mine to take. That was the pattern. Chloe was the little princess, the one whose mistakes were brushed away with a smile and a shake of the head. I was the responsible one, the reliable one, the girl who knew better, and therefore should always carry the blame. By the time I was 10, I had learned to keep quiet when she knocked over vases, scribbled on walls, or talked back. If I spoke up, the response was always the same. "Stop tattling. Lauren, be a good big sister." On birthdays, the difference showed even clearer. When I turned 12, I got a cake from the grocery store and a set of notebooks for school. When Chloe turned 12 4 years later, she got a backyard party with balloons and a rented cotton candy machine. I remember serving drinks to her friends, standing in the kitchen while my mother fussed over decorations. People said Chloe glowed that day. And she did. She was glowing because everyone made sure she did. The unfairness was not always in gifts or punishments. Sometimes it was in words. My father used to tell Chloe she was his little sunshine, that she would grow up to be something special. He rarely said those things to me. Instead, he said, "Lauren will help you. Lauren can take care of it. Lauren knows what to do." It was less praise and more obligation, a mantle I wore, because if I set it down, no one else would pick it up. As we grew older, the gap between us widened. In high school, I studied hard, joined the debate team, worked weekends at a diner to save for college. Chloe floated through cheerleading and parties. When she came home past curfew, I covered for her. I told my parents she had been with me at the library. They believed me. Because I was the reliable one. She would wink at me in the hallway the next morning, as if we were partners in crime. But really, I was the shield that let her avoid consequences. One night when I was 17, I stayed up late finishing an essay for my AP English class. Chloe, 13 at the time, sneaked into my room crying because she had failed a math test. She was terrified of telling our parents. I sat with her for hours, helping her redo problems, even writing out explanations for her to study. The next week she came home with a better grade. And my mother hugged her tightly, telling her how smart she was. I stood in the doorway, invisible, holding the coffee mug that had kept me awake through my own assignment. College cemented the roles. I earned a scholarship to Washington State University, but it covered only part of the tuition. I worked summers in a warehouse to pay the rest, living on ramen and hand-me-down furniture. Chloe, 4 years younger, wanted something different. She wanted the University of Oregon. Out of state. Expensive. My parents said money was tight. She came to me crying again, saying her dreams would die if she stayed in Washington. I had just started a steady job at a real estate firm in Seattle. Against every logical thought, I told her I would help. I signed the loan, sent checks each semester, told myself it was only temporary. When she drove away in the Honda Civic I had co-signed for her sophomore year, I stood on the curb with my hands stuffed in my coat pockets. She barely looked back, just waved and laughed with her friends. The trunk stuffed with designer clothes I had quietly paid off with overtime hours. My parents bragged about her to neighbors, about her independence, about how bright her future looked. They never mentioned my name. The word princess followed her into adulthood. At family gatherings, relatives asked Chloe about her classes, her sorority trips to California, her internship in Portland. When they turned to me, it was with practical questions. How is work? Are you still living in that apartment near downtown? You must be so proud of your sister. I nodded, smiled, swallowed the bitterness like medicine. There were rare moments when I let the anger rise. Once, when she was home for Thanksgiving, she complained about the Civic. Everyone else drives BMWs, she said. I told her sharply that she was lucky to have any car at all, that some people took the bus for years before affording their first. She rolled her eyes, tossed her hair, and muttered that I sounded jealous. My mother scolded me for snapping at her. She is young, Lauren. Let her enjoy things. By the time I was 28 and she was 24, the silence between us had stretched into something brittle. I paid her rent more than once when she bounced from one apartment to another. I sent money when she lost a job after 3 weeks. I covered credit card bills. She was too embarrassed to show our parents. Each time I told myself it was the last, but then came another phone call, another teary voice begging. And each time I gave in, because what else was I supposed to do? The distance was not just financial, it was emotional. When I called her for my 30th birthday, she forgot and texted later with a quick sorry. When she called me for hers, it was only to ask if I could help fund the trip she and her friends had planned to Miami. My parents still referred to her as their golden girl. When they spoke about me, it was practical, logistical, never glowing. Sitting in my car outside the wedding, I thought about all of it: the spilled paint, the cotton candy machine, the Honda Civic, the loans, the endless small ways I had been pushed into the shadows so she could stand in the sun. I thought about how every thank you I had wanted had been replaced with expectation, how every promise of appreciation had been swallowed by silence. The weight of those years pressed on me heavier than the gift box on the seat beside me. I could almost hear my mother's voice again, telling me to be the bigger person, to understand, to sacrifice. But I was no longer a child in the backyard with paint on the table. I was a grown woman, sitting in a car I had bought with my own paychecks, staring at a ballroom filled with flowers and music that I had funded but was not welcome to enjoy. For the first time in decades, I did not feel like the responsible sister who had to carry the blame. I felt like someone who finally saw the truth of what my family had asked of me all these years. And the truth was colder, sharper, but strangely freeing. I turned the keys in the ignition and listened to the engine hum. Steady and strong, like a voice that had been waiting quietly for too long. It was time to stop being silent. It was time to let Chloe learn what life felt like without a sister cleaning up every mess behind her. The highway stretched in front of me, dark against the fading light, and my mind drifted to the long ledger I had carried in silence for years. I never kept a real spreadsheet, though I easily could have with my job in finance. Instead, the numbers lived inside me like scars, each payment etched in memory, impossible to forget. Her first year at the University of Oregon cost more than I had ever seen in my bank account at one time. Tuition, housing, meal plans. It all added up to nearly $45,000. I remember staring at the bill, sitting in my tiny apartment in Seattle, wondering how I could possibly make it work. I had just been promoted at the real estate firm, and I had some savings. I told myself it was worth it, that helping her get an education was the greatest gift I could give. That was year 1. By year 4, the total had climbed to over $180,000. When Chloe called to tell me she had joined a sorority, her voice was bright and careless. "There are dues," she said, "but everyone is doing it." The dues were $2,000 each semester, plus fees for trips to California and Arizona. I sent the money without argument. She sent me pictures from pool parties, with captions about how much fun she was having. I studied the photos on my phone at midnight after 12-hour days, eating leftovers at my desk. Her first car came next. She said walking across campus was exhausting, that everyone else had something better. I co-signed for a Honda Civic. $18,000. She called it cute. Then a year later said it felt embarrassing. She wanted a BMW like her friends drove. Against all reason, I agreed. $28,000 more. She smiled for photos with the keys in her hand, never mentioning who made the payments. After graduation, she moved to Portland. Rent was expensive. She said she needed a modern apartment with a view of the river because that was what her new circle of friends expected. $900 a month would have been manageable. She chose $3,000 a month. For 3 years, I sent checks that totaled $90,000. I visited once, and she acted like I was an intruder in her curated world. The credit card bills began then. At first, it was clothing, then spa treatments, then vacations. She called from Cabo once, saying her card had been declined. Voice frantic. I wired the money while standing in the lobby of my office building, embarrassed but resigned. Each month I told myself I would draw the line, and each month I let her push it further. When I think about the total, nearly $950,000, it almost does not seem real. Almost $1 million, money that could have bought me a house near Green Lake, that could have built a retirement account, that could have given me security. Instead, it bought her dresses and champagne and beach trips she barely remembered. There were moments, small ones, when she did say thank you. A text after finals week. An email with a photo of her smiling at graduation. But the thanks never lasted. They dissolved into expectation, as if gratitude had an expiration date. Soon, she no longer asked if I could help. She simply told me what she needed. And I gave. Again and again. Because I thought that was what family meant. One Christmas, she handed me a framed picture of us as kids. That was her gift to me. I had given her $3,000 toward her Miami trip that same week. I stared at the picture. Us in matching dresses when I was 10 and she was 6. Our mother standing behind us. For a fleeting moment, I thought maybe she understood. Then she left early that night to meet friends. And the picture gathered dust on my shelf. What I never admitted to anyone, not even myself at times, was that part of me enjoyed being needed. There was a twisted pride in knowing I could provide, that I could solve problems. It gave me purpose, especially after years of being overlooked. But slowly, that pride turned sour. It was no longer about helping her grow. It became about feeding her entitlement. By the time the wedding came around, I had already paid deposits to vendors, nearly $150,000 in total. The gown alone cost $12,000. Delicate silk imported from Italy. I signed the check while eating takeout noodles at my desk. She texted me later that she loved it, not thanking me, but thanking the boutique for their excellent service. I thought about all of this as I drove home from the resort. The rain began to fall lightly against the windshield, each drop blurring the city lights into streaks. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. The silence in the car was thick, but inside me, the numbers kept speaking, reminding me of every hour, every dollar, every choice I had made. It was not that I had never felt joy in giving. There were times when I saw her smile and believed it mattered. But joy had slowly drained into duty. And duty had hardened into resentment. Somewhere along the line, she had stopped being grateful and started being entitled. And I had let it happen. I pulled into my driveway. The familiar outline of my small brick house, waiting in the dark. I shut off the engine and sat for a long moment, listening to the cooling tick of the car. The gift box was still on the passenger seat, untouched. Its ribbons slightly bent. I reached for it, then pulled my hand back. That box no longer mattered. What mattered were the years of choices I had made. Choices that brought me to this exact night. For the first time, I understood the weight of them not as sacrifices, but as debts owed. And not by me. By her. By Chloe. The ledger had been opened too long. And it was time for someone else to see the balance. Inside the ballroom, the unraveling began quietly. Almost like a shift in the weather that no one noticed until it was too late. At first it was only Lisa Turner, the florist, moving briskly down the aisle with 2 assistants. Guests thought she was adjusting an arrangement, fluffing petals perhaps, until she began pulling entire bouquets from their vases and lowering them into plastic tubs. The towering white orchids that framed the altar were the first to go. Their stems bent awkwardly as they disappeared into bins. Murmurs rose among the guests. A bridesmaid whispered to another, her face twisting in confusion. Someone asked aloud if the flowers were wilting or if there had been some mix-up. Lisa did not respond. Her hands moved with businesslike precision, lips pressed tight, eyes set on her task. She had the look of someone following orders she could not ignore. Across the room, Marcus Reed, owner of Elegant Bites Catering, entered with 2 men in black uniforms. They walked directly to the buffet table, where silver chafing dishes gleamed untouched. Without a word, they began closing lids, stacking plates, and wheeling carts toward the service doors. A man in a navy suit stepped forward, his hand raised. "Excuse me. My wife has not even had dinner yet." Marcus gave him a polite nod but kept moving, his jaw clenched as if bracing for confrontation. The string quartet faltered next. Their bows slowed. Notes dragging before silence swallowed the melody altogether. The microphones cut off with a pop, leaving only the scrape of chairs and the low roar of confused voices. Guests shifted in their seats, fanning themselves with programs as if the air had grown too heavy. At the center of it all, Chloe stood frozen, her face pale beneath layers of makeup. For a moment, she looked like a porcelain doll cracked down the middle. Then her voice rang out, sharper than the breaking glass of a champagne flute. "Who dares to do this?" Her words echoed under the high ceiling. Heads turned, eyes wide, waiting for someone to answer. No one did. Lisa kept working. Marcus signaled to his staff to move faster. The musicians packed their instruments. The scene carried a surreal edge, as though the wedding had been pulled inside out in front of everyone. Ryan, her groom, stormed forward, his tuxedo jacket unbuttoned and his cheeks flushed. He grabbed Marcus by the arm. "Stop. What the hell do you think you are doing?" Marcus freed himself gently but firmly. "Sir, payment has been revoked. We have to secure our property." Gasps spread through the crowd. Someone dropped a fork that clattered loudly against the marble floor. Chloe staggered, clutching the lace at her chest, her eyes darting from vendor to vendor, as though one of them might offer a different story. Instead, the staff continued their work, stripping the hall of every detail she had boasted about for months. Guests began standing, some slipping toward the doors, others craning their necks for a better view of the chaos. A woman in a sequined dress muttered that she had never seen anything like it. Another said, maybe there had been fraud. The words fraud and unpaid bills passed quickly between tables, like sparks catching in dry grass. Chloe raised her voice again, trembling now. "This is a mistake. Everything was paid for. You cannot just take things away." Lisa straightened from the altar arrangement, her gloves smudged with pollen. "Ma'am, I am sorry. We have no choice." She turned away, lifting another bouquet from its vase, leaving the altar bare and strangely exposed. Ryan turned back to Chloe, his expression tight with frustration. "Did you know about this?" His voice was low but cutting. She shook her head violently, her earrings swinging. "No. I swear. Lauren must have done something." The name hung in the air. Lauren, head swiveled as if expecting me to appear in the doorway. to gloat or to explain, but I was nowhere to be seen. Only Chloe remained, clutching her bouquet with white knuckles, standing in a crumbling palace of silk and glass. A guest in the front row rose from his seat. He wore a gray suit, his tie loosened from the heat of the room. He looked at Chloe with pity rather than curiosity. "I think we should go," he whispered to his wife. She nodded. They slipped out quietly, followed by others. Chairs scraped. Heels clicked against marble. The sound of departure louder than the music had been. Every detail that had once signaled perfection now became evidence of collapse. The chandeliers flickered as the lighting crew disconnected equipment. The stage, once set for speeches and toasts, stood empty. Waitstaff carried half-filled glasses of champagne back to the kitchen. The room smelled faintly of extinguished candles and crushed flowers. Heavy and sour, Chloe dropped her bouquet, petals scattering across the floor. Her voice cracked as she shouted again. "Stop this right now. Someone fix it. I will pay later. I promise." No one moved. Ryan rubbed his forehead with his palm, eyes closed. His family stood nearby, whispering among themselves, their expressions shifting from annoyance to embarrassment. The grandeur of the event dissolved minute by minute until only confusion remained. Guests clustered in small groups, some laughing nervously, others shaking their heads. The words scam and humiliation floated through the air. At last, Chloe stumbled toward the stage, her dress dragging across the floor where petals and napkins had begun to collect. She stood beneath the bare arch where orchids had once cascaded and screamed one final time. "Who dares to do this to me?" Silence answered. The vendors did not pause. The guests did not respond. Even her parents stood motionless near the front row. The spectacle was complete. What had been a wedding filled with promises and pride had become a theater of shame. And though I was not there to see it, I knew in my chest exactly how it unfolded. The elegance she had fought to protect was stripped away piece by piece until nothing remained but truth. The freeway stretched open before me, the skyline of Seattle fading in the rearview mirror as dusk settled across the horizon. My phone buzzed against the console again. The vibration sharp, insistent. Chloe's name filled the screen. Her picture from years ago, smiling back at me. The same girl I had once carried piggyback through our backyard. I let it ring until the call dropped. It started again immediately. This time my mother's number. I clenched my jaw and kept my hands on the wheel. The buzzing stopped. Then a voicemail notification blinked. A few seconds later it buzzed again. Ryan's number flashing across the screen. His message came through before I could silence it. "You just destroyed Chloe's life. You will pay for this." His voice was clipped, sharp, the kind of threat that came from someone who had never been told no in his life. I exhaled slowly, pressing the accelerator just enough to feel the engine respond. I had no intention of answering him. Then my mother's voice filled the car as her voicemail played. Her tone was brittle, rising higher with each word. "Lauren, what have you done? Go back right now. Apologize to your sister before you ruin our family's name. Do you want everyone in Tacoma to talk about us like we are trash?" I hit delete before the message could finish. My throat tightened, but not from guilt. It was the old reflex, the one that had lived in me since childhood. Every time my parents had chosen Chloe, every time they had scolded me for not protecting her enough, every time I was told to sacrifice so she could shine, that old reflex told me to yield, to drive back and smooth things over. But I was not that girl anymore. The phone buzzed again and again. Chloe alternating with my mother, sometimes even my father. Each ring was a demand, a command, a chain. I gripped the wheel harder, my knuckles pale, forcing myself to remember the nights I had stayed late in the office, the mornings when I left before sunrise, the weekends when friends invited me out, and I said no because Chloe's tuition was due. I remembered the warehouse job during college, stacking pallets until my back ached. I remembered writing checks while staring at an empty fridge. I remembered calculating every hour, every penny, while Chloe lived as if money were endless. Those years were my armor now, and each buzz of the phone only hammered it stronger. Headlights streaked past me as cars rushed down Interstate 5. The city fell behind, giving way to stretches of dark evergreens lining the road. My phone glowed with another incoming call. This time I pressed the screen and answered, "What?" My voice came out low, steady. It was my mother. "Finally. You listen to me. Lauren, you have humiliated your sister in front of her new family. Do you want her marriage to collapse? Do you want us to lose everything we have worked for?" I bit back a laugh. Harsh and humorless. "What exactly have you worked for? Mom, what have you ever sacrificed for Chloe that compares to what I have done?" There was silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. "You are being cruel. She is your sister. She has been my dependent." I snapped. Before I could stop myself, "Not my sister. My dependent. And I am finished." I hung up before she could respond. The car was silent again, except for the steady hum of the tires on asphalt. My chest heaved. A mix of fury and release. The kind of release that comes from finally speaking the truth after years of swallowing it. The buzzing started again within a minute. "Chloe," this time. I ignored it. Another voicemail came through. I pressed play, my thumb tight against the wheel. "Lauren, how could you? My wedding is in ruins. Everyone thinks we are broke. Ryan is furious. Fix this now, please. You cannot just do this to me." I let the message end and deleted it. The words, "please" and "fix." This now sounded less like requests and more like orders. The same orders I had been following since I was old enough to carry responsibility. She never wanted. Another call. Another voicemail. This time Ryan again. "If you think you can embarrass us and walk away, you are wrong. My family has lawyers. You will regret this." I laughed aloud this time. The sound startling in the enclosed car. He had no idea. He had no idea the contracts were in my name. The payments from my accounts. The power I held in silence for so long. The freeway curved, and I exited onto the smaller road leading toward my neighborhood. The rain had begun again, tapping softly against the windshield. My phone buzzed one last time, then stopped. The silence felt heavy, like the pause between thunder and lightning. I slowed at a red light and let my hands loosen on the wheel. My reflection stared back from the darkened window, eyes hollow but steady. For years I had been the rescuer, the fixer, the invisible hand behind Chloe's life. Tonight that hand had withdrawn, and the collapse was echoing through every call, every voicemail, every frantic word. I turned onto my street. The familiar row of modest houses greeting me with warm porch lights and trimmed hedges. My own small brick house waited at the end, quiet and solid. I pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. The phone lit up one last time before I shut it off completely. The rain thickened, drumming softly on the roof of the car. For the first time in years, the noise did not feel like a burden. It felt like a curtain closing on an old play, one I would no longer perform in. I stepped out, the damp air cool against my skin, and carried the gift box inside without looking at it again. The silence of the house wrapped around me, still and certain. Outside, the storm grew heavier, as if the world itself understood the battle that had just begun. Morning light filtered weakly through my curtains, the kind of gray Seattle sky that seemed to press down on the city. I had barely slept. My phone remained powered off on the nightstand. And for once, the silence was not suffocating. It was purposeful. I dressed simply, pulled my hair back, and gathered the folders I had kept for years. The receipts, the bank statements, the contracts that no one in my family had ever asked to see. The office of Hayes and Whitman sat on the 12th floor of a downtown tower, polished stone floors echoing under my shoes as I entered. Margaret Hayes had been recommended years ago by a colleague, though until now I had only used her for minor consultations. She was in her 60s, sharp eyes behind square glasses, her silver hair pinned neatly. She stood when I entered her office, her handshake firm. "Lauren, come in. You look like you have not had much rest." I sat across from her desk, laying down the folders one by one. Inside were copies of tuition payments, car notes, lease agreements, credit card transfers. and the most recent wedding invoices. The stack looked heavier than I remembered. The weight of a decade in paper form. Margaret opened the first folder and scanned quickly. She paused at the tuition numbers, tapping her pen against the page. $180,000 for the University of Oregon. She glanced up at me. All out of your pocket. Every dollar, she continued, flipping through pages, murmuring as she went. Vehicles. Apartment leases. Luxury purchases. $90,000 on housing in Portland alone. She leaned back, eyebrows raised. And now, wedding costs of nearly $150,000. I nodded. It totals close to $950,000. Her pen stopped tapping. That is not just generosity. That is lifetime support. I folded my hands together to keep them steady. She never saw it as support. It was always obligation. Every thank you turned into expectation. Margaret closed the folder and rested both hands on it. Then you are ready to treat this for what it is. Not gifts, but loans. Debts owed. The words sent a shiver through me. Though it was not fear, it was clarity. I leaned forward. Can we make it legal? We can, she said. We draft a formal demand letter, itemize every payment, and classify them as loans. The total owed is stated clearly. She has 30 days to respond. If she refuses, we pursue civil action. I exhaled, my chest tightening, then releasing. And you can do this quickly. Within 48 hours, she confirmed. But I need you to commit fully. Once this process begins, it changes everything. Family disputes become legal disputes. There is no going back. I thought of my mother's voicemail, my father's silence, Ryan's threats, Chloe's screams in that ballroom. Going back was already impossible. I lifted my chin. Do it. Margaret slid a form across the desk. This authorizes me to act on your behalf. She handed me a pen. The paper blurred slightly as my eyes filled with heat. My hand shook just once before I steadied it and signed my name in bold ink. Margaret smiled faintly, almost approvingly. Then we begin. She stood and moved to the filing cabinet, pulling out a thick envelope of templates. She spoke as she worked. We will send this by certified mail to Chloe Anderson at her current residence. We will also send a copy to her husband, since they are now legally tied. Husband. The word sounded brittle. I thought of Ryan's angry voice on my voicemail. His pride bruised more than his love. My pen still rested on the paper as Margaret returned with the template letter. You will receive a copy of everything, she assured me. Itemized lists, dates, amounts. This is airtight. If she challenges it, the documents speak for themselves. I gathered the folders closer, watching her begin to type, the click of her keyboard echoing through the office. Each keystroke felt like a nail sealing a box, shutting in years of sacrifice that were finally being accounted for. Margaret looked up once more. I will have drafts prepared by tomorrow morning. A courier can deliver them by noon. That means Chloe will have the documents in her hands within 24 hours. I nodded again, my throat tight. Thank you. She reached across the desk, her hand firm over mine. Sometimes the hardest thing you can do for family is to hold them accountable. Her words stayed with me as I left the office. Stepping back into the drizzle of late morning, I clutched my folders to my chest, my name freshly inked on the authorization form. The city hummed around me, buses hissing to a stop, people rushing with umbrellas. My life had just shifted onto a new track, one that no pleading phone call could pull me from. I walked to my car, the rain speckling my coat. Inside, the silence wrapped around me again. But this time, it felt different. Not empty. Not suffocating. It felt like a pause before the first strike of a hammer. The kind of pause that carries power. The ignition purred as I started the car. On the passenger seat, the folders sat neatly stacked. No longer just paper, but proof. Proof that I had given and given. And now I was ready to collect. By the time I reached home that afternoon, my phone had already lit up again with dozens of notifications. I hesitated before turning it back on. But curiosity won. The screen flooded instantly with alerts from Facebook, tags, and messages. At the top sat Chloe's post. written only hours after Margaret began drafting the legal notice. She had posted a wedding photo, herself in the gown I had paid for, smiling stiffly with Ryan by her side. Underneath, she had written, "My own sister ruined the happiest day of my life. Out of jealousy, she sabotaged my wedding, and now she is demanding nearly $1 million from me. I cannot believe family can be so cruel." The words were designed to sting. And they did. I scrolled through the hundreds of comments beneath. Friends from her college years. Old neighbors from Tacoma. Even some distant relatives chimed in. Most sided with her. Borklu. How could anyone do that? Family is supposed to support each other. My chest tightened as I saw two familiar names. My mother had commented, "I am ashamed of Lauren. No one should treat their sister this way." My father added his own. "Please pray for Chloe during this time. She is the victim of unimaginable cruelty." My hands trembled so badly I had to set the phone down. The betrayal cut deeper than I had expected. It was not enough that they stood silent at the wedding. Now they were siding with her publicly, feeding her narrative. The next day at the office, the tension was immediate. I worked at Crescent Realty, a mid-sized firm in downtown Seattle. Normally my coworkers greeted me warmly in the mornings. But that day, conversations hushed when I entered the break room. Two associates I had trained years ago avoided eye contact as they poured coffee. Later, while walking past a conference room, I overheard them whispering, "Is it true? Did she really sue her own sister over wedding money?" Another voice answered, "I saw it on Facebook. Her sister said it was almost $1 million. Who even does that to family?" My face burned, but I kept walking. Shoulders straight. At my desk, emails piled in from clients. A few asked delicately if I was all right. One canceled a meeting altogether, saying they wanted to wait until things settled. Gossip travels fast in business. Faster than truth. That evening, exhausted, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the folders Margaret had asked me to organize further. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message request from someone I did not know. I opened it warily. "Hello, Lauren. My name is Daniel Cooper. I am a journalist with the Seattle Tribune. I have seen recent posts circulating about you and your sister. I would like to hear your side." I stared at the message for a long time. My instinct was to delete it. The thought of airing our family mess to the press made my stomach twist, but then I remembered Chloe's post. The hundreds of comments branding me cruel and jealous. My own parents adding their voices against me. My silence had always protected her. Maybe now it was protecting a lie. I typed slowly, "What exactly would this involve?" His reply came quickly. "An interview. Documentation if you are willing. I am interested in exposing the full story, not just the version that is being spread online." I set the phone down and pressed my palms against the cool surface of the table. Margaret's words echoed in my mind. Sometimes the hardest thing you can do for family is to hold them accountable. Perhaps accountability required more than legal letters. Perhaps it required truth, laid bare where everyone could see it. The rain tapped against the kitchen window as I leaned back in my chair. Across the room the folders waited, thick with receipts and records. They were more than proof now. They were a voice, one I had kept buried for too long. I picked up my phone again and typed a final response. "Let's talk." Daniel replied with a single line. "Tomorrow morning. I will bring a recorder." I ended the call and sat in the quiet, the decision settling over me, like a stone dropped into deep water. For years, Chloe had controlled the story. She had been the princess, the golden child, the victim whenever things went wrong. Tomorrow the story would no longer belong to her alone. I rose from the table, carried the folders into my study, and stacked them neatly. My heart raced. Equal parts fear and resolve. The silence of the house wrapped around me again. But this time it did not feel like retreat. It felt like preparation. Daniel arrived the next morning with a leather satchel and a calm expression that carried both curiosity and caution. We sat at my dining table where sunlight slanted through the blinds and fell across the stacks of folders I had spent the night arranging. He set down a small recorder, asked for my permission, and then leaned forward with a notebook ready. "Tell me everything," he said. "Not just the money, but the history, People need context to understand. So I told him. I spoke of spilled paint and cotton candy machines, of the Honda Civic and the BMW, of the Portland apartment with its river view. I gave him numbers, dates, check copies, receipts. I described the feeling of handing over tuition payments while living on takeout noodles, of watching Chloe accept keys to her new car while I went without vacations for a decade. Daniel listened without interrupting, his pen moving steadily. Occasionally, he would ask me to clarify an amount or a year, but mostly he let me speak. When my voice faltered, when memories pushed heat into my throat, he let the silence settle until I found my words again. By the end of the interview, the table was covered in paper. Bank statements with my signature, contracts with my name as guarantor, emails where Chloe asked for more money with words like urgent and please. The evidence formed a picture that could no longer be hidden behind her smile or her carefully crafted posts. Daniel closed his notebook and switched off the recorder. This is not jealousy. This is financial abuse. He looked me directly in the eye. Are you sure you want this public? It will change everything. I thought of my parents' comments online, of coworkers whispering, of Ryan's threat on my voicemail. Yes, I said. I want the truth out. He nodded and gathered his things. The article will run tomorrow. I will send you the draft before it goes live. That night, I barely slept. I sat by the window, watching headlights flicker along the street, listening to the steady rain. My phone remained silent, as if the world itself held its breath. By noon the next day, the headline was everywhere. Wedding chaos, sister, who paid nearly $1 million abandoned at ceremony. Beneath it was Daniel's article. My story told plainly with documentation, photographs of receipts and bank transfers filled the page. Each one matched to the luxury Chloe had flaunted. The contrast was undeniable. The internet reacted quickly. Thousands shared the article. First in Seattle, then beyond. Comment sections overflowed with outrage. Not at me, but at Chloe. People wrote that she had exploited me, that she had treated me like a wallet, that no sibling deserved that. The tide that had once been against me turned almost overnight. At Crescent Realty, the whispers stopped. A colleague approached my desk with a quiet apology. I saw the article, she said. I had no idea. Others sent supportive emails, telling me they admired my strength. Clients called back to reschedule meetings. For the first time in days, I felt air return to my lungs. Meanwhile, Chloe's post was buried under waves of backlash. Screenshots of her words circulated beside my receipts, exposing the gap between her story and the truth. People began tagging Ryan's family, questioning their silence. That evening I heard from Margaret. She sounded pleased. The article strengthens our position, she said. Any claim that you acted out of malice is gone. Now it is a matter of collecting what is owed. But while Margaret saw legal advantage, Ryan's family saw humiliation. By the following morning, word spread that the Andersons had held a private meeting. Ryan's mother, a woman who prided herself on reputation in her Kirkland social circles, had confronted Chloe directly. How could you not tell us? She demanded. According to a mutual acquaintance, you let us walk into a marriage under false pretenses. Ryan's father was even more blunt. He reportedly told her that integrity mattered more than appearances, and that she had endangered their family's name. When Ryan finally called me, his voice lacked the heat of his earlier threats. Instead, it was cool, almost detached. You could have kept this private, he said. Now, everyone knows. I kept my tone steady. Everyone knows because Chloe lied. I gave her years. Ryan, years of my life. She threw it back in my face. There was silence on the line. Then a heavy sigh. My family is asking whether this marriage should stand. The words hung in the air like smoke. He did not say he loved her. Did not say he would defend her. He said only that his family was questioning if it should continue. That night I imagined Chloe in whatever hotel she had retreated to, scrolling through the article, watching the comments flood in. I imagined Ryan sitting across from her, his expression tight, his words clipped. I imagined my parents reading silently, their own public comments now preserved beside evidence of their blindness. I did not feel joy in that vision. I felt something sharper. Colder. But steady. The truth had finally spoken louder than the lies. As the city settled into another rainy night, my phone buzzed again. This time it was not Chloe or Ryan, but Daniel. Sending a short message. They are already talking about a follow-up. People want to know what happens next. I set the phone down. The words lingering in my mind. What happened next was no longer about silence or shame. It was about consequences. And for the first time in years, those consequences no longer belonged to me. The article went live early the next morning. My phone buzzed non-stop with notifications before I even poured coffee. The headline glared across every screen: Wedding chaos in Seattle. Sister spent nearly $1 million, only to be cast aside. Beneath it was Daniel's careful retelling of my story, lined with photographs of receipts, contracts, and bank transfers. He had laid out the timeline clearly, year by year, expense by expense. There was no angle to twist, no detail to soften. It was simply the truth. At first I was afraid to scroll through the comments. My stomach knotted as my finger hovered over the screen, half expecting another storm of insults. But what I saw was different. People were outraged. Yes, but not at me. They were outraged for me. One comment read, "This woman gave up her life savings for her sister. That is not jealousy. That is love abused." Another said, "Chloe sounds like a spoiled brat who thought money fell from the sky." And then thousands more, piling on. Some sharing their own stories of being the forgotten sibling, the reliable one who never got thanks. The shift was undeniable. Strangers, colleagues, even distant acquaintances I had not spoken to in years, sent messages of support. A client wrote that she admired my strength and wanted to continue working with me despite the noise online. My coworkers at Crescent Realty stopped whispering behind my back. One of them came to my desk and placed a hand on my shoulder. "I am sorry for judging you before I knew," she whispered. Meanwhile, Chloe's Facebook post began to collapse under its own weight. The same friends who had once defended her now commented with questions. "Did you really expect your sister to keep paying forever? Is it true she paid for your entire education?" The thread became a battlefield. And for the first time, Chloe did not look like a victim. By evening, the story had spread beyond Seattle. National outlets picked it up, framing it as a cautionary tale about entitlement and family debt. Hashtags trended. Talk radio debated whether I had been too generous or whether Chloe should face legal consequences. But the most important fallout was happening privately in Kirkland, at the Anderson home. A mutual acquaintance told me that Ryan's parents had called an urgent family meeting. His mother, meticulous about appearances in her social circles, demanded to know why Chloe had not disclosed the financial arrangement. His father asked point-blank if Chloe had ever planned to repay me. Chloe stumbled. According to the source, she said it had always been gifts, that I had never said otherwise. Ryan's father responded that a lifetime of support could not be dismissed as gifts, especially not when the numbers added up to nearly $1 million. Ryan himself called me later that night. His voice was different from the anger he had spat at me days earlier. This time it was cold, detached. "My family feels deceived," he said. "They are questioning whether this marriage should even continue." I kept my tone level. "Then maybe they are finally seeing the truth." There was silence on his end. Then, a sigh. "Chloe told us nothing about this. We walked into the wedding thinking everything was secure. Now we look like fools." For the first time in years, I felt no urge to defend her. "That is because she wanted you to see what she wanted," I said quietly. "She has done the same to me all my life." He muttered something about needing time to think and ended the call without goodbye. I set the phone down, staring at the dim glow of the screen as the house settled into night. My parents had not called since the article appeared. Not a word of apology. Not a single attempt to defend me. They had chosen their side. And now that side was collapsing beneath them. The next morning, another update reached me. A friend from college texted, saying she had overheard Ryan's mother at the Bellevue Club speaking to her circle. She was quoted as saying, "We cannot allow our family to be tied to someone so reckless with the truth." The implication was clear. Annulment was being discussed openly. I sat back in my chair. hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold. The chaos that Chloe had tried to pin on me was now circling back around her. She had lit a fire online, but the truth had turned it, and now the flames licked at her marriage, her reputation, and the fragile image she had built. I looked at the folders stacked neatly on my desk. The same ones I had carried into Margaret Hayes's office. For years they had been silent witnesses, collecting dust while I kept peace. Now they had spoken, and their voice carried further than I had ever imagined. Outside the window, the sky brightened slightly, though clouds still lingered. My phone buzzed again with another alert. This time it was not Chloe or Ryan, but another journalist requesting an interview, this one from a national network. I did not answer right away. I sat in the quiet, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator, the steady tick of the clock, and the distant echo of my sister's world beginning to fracture. The suite at the Grand Bellevue was supposed to be their sanctuary, the place where the mess of the wedding could be shut out behind gold-trimmed doors. Instead, it became an arena. Later, I would hear from one of Ryan's cousins that the argument started before breakfast was even served. He had slammed the room service menu down on the table, the sound sharp enough to make her flinch. "You lied to me, Chloe," he said, his voice carrying through the walls. "You let me marry you without telling me that your entire life was paid for by your sister. Do you understand how that makes me look?" She tried to defend herself. She told him it was not lying, that it had never mattered. That family helped each other, and that was the end of it. But Ryan had already seen the article, already read every receipt, every check, every number spelled out in black and white. His voice broke with a mix of fury and shame. "I will not be the husband who inherits almost $1 million in hidden strings. I will not be the fool at the country club who everyone whispers about." She begged him then, told him that the money had nothing to do with their marriage, that I was jealous and vindictive. She cried that it was all being twisted against her. But he was already pulling his suitcase from the closet, tossing shirts into it without folding them, his movements clipped and final. A hotel maid passing by later told the front desk that she heard the bride sobbing, her voice shrill, echoing down the hallway. Guests stopped to listen as Ryan's words cut through the heavy carpeted walls. "This marriage is a fraud. I do not even know who you are." By noon he was gone, the wheels of his luggage rattling across marble floors while the concierge avoided his eyes. Chloe remained upstairs, her dress still hanging from the closet door, pearls scattered across the vanity like discarded tokens from a play. That evening, my phone rang, and for a long moment I could not bring myself to answer. The caller ID showed Ryan's parents. When I finally picked up, his mother's voice was calm, steady, carrying a weight I had never heard before. "Lauren, we wanted to reach out. We have read the article. We have spoken to Ryan. You spared our son from a lifetime of deception. Thank you." Her husband's voice joined faintly in the background, deeper, firmer. "You did what needed to be done. We are sorry it had to come to this, but we are grateful." I sat frozen in my chair, staring at the darkened window as their words sank in. For years I had been invisible to Chloe's world, a shadow behind her spotlight. Now her husband's family was thanking me for the very thing my own parents could not acknowledge. After the call ended, I remained still, my hands folded in my lap, the silence of my house thick around me. A strange mix of sorrow and relief coursed through me. I had not wanted to destroy her life, but I also could not deny the vindication of hearing the truth spoken aloud by someone other than me. Meanwhile, Chloe's collapse spread quickly. Friends who had once filled her feeds with congratulations began erasing their comments, deleting photos, unfriending quietly. Screenshots of the article appeared beside her old posts, people pointing out the contrast between her curated image and the reality of her dependence. Invitations she had bragged about receiving disappeared. A brunch group she often flaunted online replaced her without explanation. Even her closest friends stepped back. One former roommate from Portland wrote publicly, "I always wondered how she afforded everything. Now I know." Others reposted the article with captions like, "Entitlement has consequences." In less than a week, her carefully built kingdom cracked apart. The glamour that had shielded her for years fell away, leaving her isolated, exposed. Ryan's family moved quickly too. An annulment was already being discussed. The legal language of deception and non-disclosure floating between lawyers' offices. Ryan himself never called again, though I heard through whispers that he had returned to his parents' estate in Kirkland, refusing even to collect the rest of his belongings from the hotel. 7 days. That was all it took. 7 days from the lavish ceremony filled with imported flowers and orchestras to a bride abandoned in a hotel suite. Her husband gone. Her friends silent. Her reputation shredded. My parents did not call, they stayed quiet. Perhaps too embarrassed to defend her now. Perhaps still clinging to the fantasy that I had gone too far. But silence is also a choice. And theirs spoke loudly. I thought of Chloe sitting alone in that suite, scrolling through her phone, watching followers vanish one by one. I thought of her clutching the pearls I had paid for, wondering how it had all slipped away so fast. I wondered if she blamed me entirely, or if some small part of her finally realized what decades of entitlement had built. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee cooling in my hand, watching rain gather on the glass. My own house felt steady beneath me, solid in its simplicity. No chandeliers, no imported orchids, no crowds to impress, just 4 walls and a roof I had paid for myself. For the first time in years, I felt like I was not carrying her weight anymore. The burden had shifted, and she was finally feeling what it meant to live without someone else cleaning up every mess. The refrigerator hummed softly behind me. The clock ticked steady on the wall, and outside the mist settled low over the neighborhood. Chloe's world had shattered in a single week. But Mine, for once, felt unshaken. The phone rang late in the evening, its shrill sound cutting through the quiet of my living room. I glanced at the screen and saw Chloe's name glowing back at me. For a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something inside me told me to answer. Her voice came fast and broken, heavy with panic. Lauren, please. I do not know what to do. The hotel is demanding payment for the suite. They said if I cannot pay tonight, I have to leave. My credit cards are maxed, and Ryan has blocked my number. I listened in silence, the weight of her words washing over me. She kept speaking, her sobs punctuating each sentence. Everyone is gone. My friends are not answering. Some have even blocked me. I tried calling Lisa from college, and she hung up. Even Hannah, who stood by me through everything, says she cannot get involved. I have no one left. Her voice cracked harder, raw and unguarded. I always thought I could count on you. I treated you like a bank, like you owed me. I never once stopped to think about what it cost you. Not just money, but your life. Hearing her admit, it felt surreal. For years I had waited for words like those, and now they spilled out only because her world had collapsed. I stayed quiet, letting her continue. I lied on social media, she confessed, her words tumbling faster. I said you were jealous, that you wanted to ruin me, but it was me. I ruined everything. I let the money blind me, and I let my pride make me cruel. Her sobs filled the line, and then she whispered the words I had never heard from her mouth. I am sorry. I closed my eyes, leaning back in the chair, the weight of decades pressing against my chest. This was the sister I had wanted all along. The girl who could admit fault, who could speak truth without lacing it with entitlement. Chloe, I said finally, my tone calm but firm. This is the consequence of the choices you made. You treated my sacrifices like they were air, like they would never run out. Now you are learning what it feels like when that air is gone, she begged then, her voice rising with desperation. Please, do not let this be the end. I have nothing left. Lauren, my husband is gone. My friends do not trust me. Mom and Dad will not even look me in the eye. Please give me one last chance to make it right. The silence, on my end, stretched long, heavy. I thought of the nights I had spent working overtime while she danced in clubs, the mornings I had written checks while she slept until noon, the holidays where my parents praised her while I sat invisible. I thought of the wedding day, her words cutting into me like knives. You are not invited. Leave. Finally, I spoke. If there is a chance for you, it is not about me handing you more. It is about you standing on your own for once in your life. Her sobbing slowed, replaced by small gasps. I will do anything. Just tell me how. I pressed my hand against my chest, steadying my breath. You will start with honesty. You will admit to everyone what you just admitted to me. You will find work, any work, and you will live within what you earn. And you will not ask me for $1. Not one. There was a pause on the other end. And then, a faint whisper. I can try. No, I said, my voice firm. You will do. Trying is what you have said your whole life. This time you will do. The line went quiet again except for her shallow breathing. For the first time in years, I felt the power of balance shift. It was no longer me chasing her approval or carrying her burdens. She was the one asking, pleading, promising. Lauren, she said again, her tone softer, stripped of the arrogance I had known so well. Please believe me. I want to change. I cannot lose you too. I closed my eyes and let the words settle. Somewhere deep inside, I wanted to believe her, but belief would not come cheap this time. We will see, I said at last. When the call ended, I sat in the quiet of my living room, the glow of the lamp casting shadows across the walls. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining under the streetlights. For the first time, Chloe's voice had not carried command or entitlement. It had carried the sound of a woman stripped bare. Pleading for the chance to rebuild, I leaned back, listening to the steady tick of the clock, and let the weight of the moment settle over me. The next morning, sunlight spilled across my kitchen table, pale but steady, and I sat with a mug of coffee in my hands. My phone rested beside me, silent, until a new message appeared. It was Chloe again. Her words were shorter now, stripped of the frantic tone from the night before. Please, just a little help to keep me afloat. I will do what you ask. I let the message sit for a while before I responded. Then I called her. She answered on the first ring. Her voice hushed, almost timid. Lauren. I spoke clearly, measured. I will transfer $1,000 into your account today. That will cover a week at the hotel and enough to eat. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Thank you, I continued before she could say more. But there will be conditions. You will find work within 2 weeks. I do not care if it is waiting tables, cleaning offices, or answering phones. You will take the first job available. For 6 months you will live on what you earn. No excuses. And when we talk, it will be as adults, not as a dependent and a provider. Silence filled the line. I wondered for a moment if she would argue, if the old Chloe would surface again. Instead I heard a sob, raw and quiet. I will do it. I promise. I will not let you down again. Is that still? The hum of the refrigerator filling the pause. Promises were easy. But, for the first time, I sensed she might finally mean them. Later that afternoon, I logged into my bank account, entered her information, and pressed transfer. Watching the confirmation message appear on the screen, I felt no resentment. It was not another sacrifice. It was a line drawn, a final lesson wrapped in numbers. That evening, Chloe called again, her voice unsteady but softer. I do not deserve this, she said. You should have left me to figure it out alone. You are right, I replied. You do not deserve it. But everyone deserves one chance to grow up. This is yours. She wept openly then, not with the anger or manipulation I had grown used to, but with the sound of someone finally seeing the truth. I listened quietly, my heart steady. Over the next few days, I heard little from her. Only a text once, saying she had applied to 3 jobs. Another telling me she had an interview scheduled at a local diner. The tone was different. Les demande. More effort. I did not rush to call or check in. This was her path to walk. For years I had carried her on my back, shielding her from consequences. Now she was learning what it meant to stand, even shakily, on her own. 1 week later, I received an email from Margaret Hayes. She had finalized the demand letter, ready to be delivered. But he hesitated. I stared at the file on my computer screen. my finger hovering over the mouse. After all that had happened, after the wreckage of her wedding, her marriage, her reputation, I wondered if legal pursuit was even necessary. I closed the file and let it sit. The law was still an option. But for the first time I felt no need to wield it immediately. Chloe's collapse had already taught her more than a courtroom ever could. That night I sat on my porch. The cool Seattle air brushing against my face. The sound of distant traffic humming in the background. I thought of the years behind me. Of the countless checks and long nights. Of the silence that had weighed me down. I thought of the little girl Chloe used to be. The one who had once clung to my hand at the county fair. For the first time I felt no anger, no bitterness. Just a quiet sense of release. She had asked me for one more chance, and I had given it with conditions. Whether she rose or fell now was in her own hands. I leaned back against the porch chair and closed my eyes. The battles that had defined so much of my life had finally shifted away from me. Chloe's lessons were no longer mine to teach or to carry. I breathed deeply, the cool night air filling my lungs, and let myself feel the calm that had eluded me for decades. If you have ever faced betrayal or unfairness in your own family, share your story in the comments below. Do not forget to like and subscribe to support this channel so more voices can be heard.